Hello and welcome back. This is Jennifer and I'm glad you're here. Today I'm showing how to create tri-fold cards with a shaped flap on the front. This is a fun way to take any of your stamps and dies and create a card that is very unique and something a little unexpected. So the front flap of the card is shaped, and when you open it up, you'll see another panel, and then you open it again and there's the personal message inside. I will first share how to do this using a large image, and then I'll share how to do this using smaller images. Let's get started with this example. I did several different colors. This is an A2 card, and that large flower on the front is actually the front flap of the card. And when you open that, you'll see the inside panel, and you open it again, and there's a place for your personal message. Now for this, I'm using the Altenew Golden Days hot foil plate. This is a new one from Altenew. I did another video using a similar hot foil plate. I'll link to it up here on the top right, so you can look for more ideas for this type of design. There is also a stencil set that allows you to quickly color in this hot foil image, or you can use these stencils without the hot foil plate, and it gives an absolutely beautiful result. So again, you can just use these stencils alone if you want to create a beautiful layered flower very quickly. I will be using them together today because I love hot foil. Here are some examples and a guide for using those stencils and the hot foil plate either together or separately. I find these guides in the Altenew packaging very helpful. I'm using this large image to create the shaped front to our card. I have a piece of cardstock that is 5.5 by 8.5 inches, and I'm drawing a pencil line right down the center at 4.25 inches. So this, when folded, will be a regular A2 note card. But I'm going to keep this flat for now and take our large hot foil plate and line it up. Now the front of the card will be over there on the right. So I'm making it so that part of it hangs over the middle, but most of that flower is on the right-hand side of this piece. Once I'm happy with the position, I will use some temporary tape to tape it down, and I'm putting the tape right up against that pencil line. So the right edge of the tape is against the pencil line. That will just help me figure out where my foil needs to go. I decided today to change things up and demonstrate the foiling using my Gemini foil machine. You'll see that in a moment. So I'm cutting a piece of foil to be a bit bigger than our large floral hot foil plate. I'm sliding the foil underneath the foil plate, making sure the pretty side of the hot foil plate touches the pretty side of the foil. And I'm making sure that the foil goes all the way up against the edge of that tape. That way there's foil on the front of our card. I trim off the excess, and I'm saving that to use with some hot foil sentiments later on. Okay, so now we have the pretty side of our foil touching the pretty side of our foil plate, and it stops at that halfway point. Now this is the Gemini Foilpress machine. If you have a Gemini die cut machine, this is the foil machine you would use. If you have a Spellbinders Platinum machine or a Big Shot or something like that, you would use the Glimmer machine from Spellbinders. And that's what I normally demonstrate in my videos. But I wanted to show for those who have a Gemini that the Gemini Foilpress works great and works wonderfully to do foil. What I do is I turn the machine on, and then I press the bottom left button over there, right there. That's the low temperature button. I press that, and when the light turns green, and I believe it beeps, you know that your platform is ready to go. It's all heated up. Please know that I do my foiling with my Foilpress a little bit different than the instruction manual. You could definitely follow the instruction manual. If you want to, it works just fine. This is just what I found works for me. Now the Foilpress only has one plate that goes on top, and you can see it fits it perfectly. And after we do the foiling process, we'll run this through our Gemini machine, which you'll see in a moment. Okay, so now I'm taking that hot foil plate with the foil and the cardstock attached, and I'm laying it so the back of the foil plate is on that purple area, which is nice and hot. I'm laying this down, and you'll see the cardstock hangs out the bottom. It doesn't matter at all. Then I put the plate on top, and I am going to set a timer button. Now I like to heat mine up for 20 seconds. So I press this button till it's to 20 seconds. Once you set it, it stays that way. And then once it's at 20 seconds, I hit the heat button. That starts warming everything up. There is a timer going. When it hits 0, it will beep and you're ready to go. So at that point, when it hits 0, you will pull those platforms out towards you very gently, and you'll take the platforms and everything and run it through your Gemini Junior. So it just beeped. I'll pull the platforms out, and I'm running this through my Gemini Junior. It's hard to see, but I'm putting it right into the front. It'll come out the other side. It automatically feeds on its own. And this will actually add the heat and add enough pressure that the foil actually is debossed a bit. It's just a beautiful result. By the way, I'm using Neenah Classic Crest Solar White in 110 pound, but you could use whatever cardstock you have. Okay, so now I'm cutting away that tape so I can remove my hot foil plate. Now we have our foil only on the right-hand side because that's where I put the foil. And look at that beautiful result. So this I'll be able to fold and turn into a note card that has the foil on the front only. You'll notice that there is some debossing from the foil plate over on the left-hand side. That's okay. We're going to be covering that up when we design this card anyway. Okay, so now I'm doing a score line right where that pencil line was, which is at 4 1/4 inches, and folding that in half. I wanted to demonstrate that using a hot foil machine is very easy to do, regardless of the machine that you have. You just need to pick out which foil machine goes with whatever die cut machine you have. Okay, now it's time to add some color to that large foil image, and this is super easy to do with the stencils that I showed you earlier. I'm starting with the first one that has the most open area, and I'm taping it down onto the front of our card. I am putting a lot of tape around it because I want to make sure I don't get the ink in other areas. But you know what? It turns out it really doesn't matter if the ink gets there. You'll see why later. I have my Waffle Flower stencil mat that I'm working on. That's my favorite surface to do inking. I'm using Altenew Crisp Dye Ink. This is the pink pearl color. And a large Altenew blending brush. And I'm applying a soft amount of this color into the opening. Now this is applying ink over the foil area. It doesn't matter. It doesn't damage or dull our foil in any way. Okay, so now I have my first layer of ink down, and now I can move to the second layer of the stencil. Their stencils are numbered, so they're easy to follow. Now I'm taping this one down, and I reuse those pieces of tape a few times. This is Altenew tape that is really nice for die cutting and stenciling, and there's quite a bit on a roll, which I think is nice too. So I'm coming in with a slightly darker color and putting a light amount of that down. That is Coral Bliss. I wanted this to be a softer flower in the end, so I'm putting less color down than I normally do. Now it's time for stencil number 3, and I thought it'd be fun to add in another color. Usually when I'm doing stamp or stencil layering, I stick with a light, medium, and dark of the same color family. But I think it's fun to also add in other colors, so you get really unique blends. Here I'm using Altenew Sunray and adding some yellow ink over the peach we've already done. I did go back to the Coral Bliss and add a bit more of that too. So these colors will blend together and give a beautiful result. So don't be afraid to mix different colors when you're doing your layering with stencils or stamps. And by the way, if you don't have a foil machine, you could definitely be doing the same process with just those layering stencils, and you'll get a beautiful result too. It just won't have the outline, but it looks beautiful that way, and my other video demonstrates that. In my other video, I use a different flower, but it's very similar. I love large images like this because you can make a bold card very quickly. Okay, so there we have our flower. I still have to ink in the center, but I'll come back to that. Now it's time to cut away around that flower on the front of the card. I first cut along the score line above and below the large image. Then I will fussy cut around everything to the right of that score line. Now I know I might lose some people here when I say fussy cut, but it is just one large image, not very hard to do. And if you do have a large coordinating die, you could do partial die cutting to cut around it instead. But I definitely think it's worth the time to do the fussy cutting so that you get this shaped front to your card. At this point, I remembered I still needed to ink in the center of our flower, and the 4th stencil from the set does that, and I did it with a dark brown ink. Okay, now it's time to create the other fold in the card, the other part of the trifold. So I have a second note card. This is 4 1/4 by 5 1/2 inches. And these two will get glued together so that that second note card folds out to the right. Now I wanted to add some interest to that panel that will be behind the flower. So I am using a debossing die. This is a piercing plate. So instead of cutting, it actually just does pierced dots. And I am a big fan of these dies. I think they're a great way to add interest to a background or even on top of stamping. And I really like this particular one because it doesn't cut the outside edge, so you can easily use it on the front of a note card. So I taped it to the front of my card, and I'm running it through my die cut machine as I would normally with any die. But again, instead of cutting, this is just making the piercing pattern. You can use this with whatever die cut machine you have. Now you could stop at that point, but I like to then make an impression with the die, which makes the piercing pattern stand out more. To do that, I keep the paper and the die still taped together, and I put it face down onto my flexible embossing mat, and then put the embossing plate on top and run that through. So this just presses the die into the cardstock, just kind of enhancing those pierced patterns. Now you can do this embossing or making an impression with the die using any die cut machine you have. You just follow the instructions and the supplies the machine comes with. So there you can see that beautiful pattern in the front of our note card. Love these type of dies, and I'm hoping more will come out in 2022. Okay, so now we can add this card in with our other. So I've opened that card that we just debossed, and on the inside I'm putting some strong liquid adhesive, and I'll take the panel of our shaped front card and lay that right into it. This creates a very easy tri-fold card. The reason I decided to do the tri-fold is so that the flap on the right closes and we have a place to hide our personal message. For a nice finished look, I did cut a piece of light peach cardstock to 4 by 5 1/4, and I'm gluing that on the inside, and that's where my message will be written. Now it's time to add some sentiments. I used the Altenew Fancy Hugs die that I've used many times in videos and cut it 3 times from Tim Holtz Black Matte Cardstock, my favorite black cardstock to use for sentiments. By gluing 3 layers together, we take a very delicate die cut and make it a little bit stronger so it can hang off the edge. So I put some glue on the back of that, and I'm gluing it onto the flower. And you'll see how the edge hangs off the left-hand side. I did decide to cut that off in the end so that it would fit into the envelope okay. Next, I thought it'd be fun to have 3 sentiment strips behind the flower, so when you open it, you see them. I have here the 3 Altenew sentiment strip stamp sets. There's the first, then there's sentiment strips 2, and now they've recently come out with the sentiment strips 3. I use these a lot in my videos, so I'm glad there's a third option available now. These are excellent for sentiment strips on any style of card. Here's a closer look at the new third set. It has sentiments like "You were made to shine," "When it rains, look for rainbows." Let's see, "Happy birthday, you fill my heart." But then there's fun ones like "The world needs your light," "Sending birthday hugs with heartfelt thanks," "I'm only a text away," "Always thinking of you." So those other 2 have been on my favorites list in the past, and I'm sure this one will be on my favorites list this year. So I white heat embossed the sentiments on black cardstock, and I'm using the Altenew featured sentiment dies to cut them out. I like these dies because they're different sizes and they have rounded corners. Now I ended up cutting off the rounded corners for this particular card, but I kept them on the other cards. I like having the option of a straight edge that you cut yourself, or leaving the rounded corner. So I glued these 3 sentiments on the inside edge of that pierced flap. That way when the floral flap is closed, you don't see them, and it's a nice surprise when you open it. You could decorate this more if you wanted to, but I like keeping it clean and simple. I had fun making this design, so I decided to make more in additional colors. So I have additional pieces of cardstock here where I did the foiling on the right-hand side. Now it's time to add the color. To make the process faster, I used the first stencil on all of them. So here I'm inking this one up with a light amount of pink ink. Then I clean off the stencil just by wiping it with a dry cloth. Then I move the stencil onto the next background and apply a different color to that. So by doing this, I save time by wiping away the excess ink after I color it. So here I'm inking it all with blue. When I'm done, I wipe that excess ink off while it's still on our background. Then we can move on to the next color. So I ended up doing, I think, 5 additional colors. We have pink, a yellow, blue, purple, a teal color, and then the peach that I started with. This would be a great card collection to give to someone as a gift, but I plan to send them to different people. I did add a few Trinity Stamps Bubble Bath pearls to the front just for a little bit of shine, but you could leave those off. I do like that the Bubble Bath pearls or gems match the iridescent foil that I used on the flower. So taking a closer look, you can see that foil shine that's beautiful. Then the inking we did on top and the debossing that we did on that inside panel. This definitely is a fun card design because it's completely unexpected. I did use Altenew inks for the different flowers because that's super easy for me when I'm doing layering, because they have collections where there's a light, medium, dark, and extra dark in the same color family. I can just grab those 4 inks, use them together, and I know they will work great. However, when I'm feeling creative, I will add in another color like I did on the peach flower earlier. So this demonstrates how easy it is to create a shaped front flap card using a large image. And I'll link to another video that shows some more ideas using large dies and other things. It'll be linked here on the top right. But now let's create a shaped front flap card using smaller images that we cluster together. This time I made an A2 card that's landscape, so it's 4 1/4 by 5 1/2 inches. When you open up the front flap, there's an additional flower on the inside flap. For this, I'm using the new Altenew Golden Days 6x8 stamp set. This is a really beautiful layering stamp set. It has an outline image that you can use alone or together with the layering. I decided to skip the outline. It just creates such a beautiful, realistic look. There are coordinating dies available and stencil masks available. I will use this to create a soft color in the background. It's also great if you like to do masking. You don't have to cut a mask using those ready-made masks. Here's the guide just so you can see some design ideas using these flowers, and there are ink color suggestions and other things on the inside. I always like to show these in videos because I find seeing more examples is very inspiring. So I decided to do a lot of stamping so I have extra pieces for additional cards later on. I'm using my MISTI stamping tool to save time, but you could use an acrylic block. If you want to, you can pause and screenshot these ink colors. I decided to do some flowers blue, some purple, and then I'll do a dull purple, which I'll show you in a moment. I have pieces of 8 1/2 by 11 cardstock cut in half, and I'm stamping in the corner of those. By stamping once and rotating and stamping another, I'm able to make more layered images in much less time. So now I'm switching on to the purple, and I'll stamp one in one corner, rotate, and stamp another in another corner. Now I am using a pressure tool, that's that tool over on the left, to help me apply pressure over these solid images, and I'll link to that below. I decided to add another set of flowers using this color family. I didn't use this in my card today, but I wasn't really sure what I was going to do in the end. Now I have these spare flowers left over for other cards. This is the green ink family I'm using for the leaves. I have 2 leaves, the bottom layer, that I'm stamping with the lightest green, which is Firefly. I'll stamp those, rotate, and stamp again. So we'll have lots of images when we're done, lots of flowers, lots of leaves. Now, after I do the first layer of the leaves, I'm going back with the second layer of the flowers. The reason I'm switching between the two is I like my ink to dry a bit before I stamp the next layer, just so it stays nice and crisp. You could also heat set in between each layer to make sure it's dry. Okay, so now I'm coming in with this slightly darker color and stamping that. And right away, you see how these start to look so beautiful with the layers. I am a big fan of layering stamps like this because of the realistic results that you get. These particular flowers are very easy to line up. The shape of them is super easy to line up. And I definitely think it's worth the time to stamp the layers. For me, stamping a colorful image like this is much faster than coloring with pencils, markers, or paint. I'm very slow with that process, and I prefer the stamping. However, if you prefer to do the coloring on your own, the outline image is included in the set. So here you see me finishing up the second layer of the leaves. Now it's time to go back and do the third layer of the flowers. Now I'm speeding through this just to save time in this video, but if you want to see a more in-depth video about doing stamp layering, I will link to a video up here on the top right that you can check out. So I continued to do the layering. There are 3 layers to the leaves, and then I think there's 4 layers to the flowers. I will come back and stamp the center of the flowers later. There are little images for that too. But first I'm taking the mask stencil that is available to go with the stamp set. And I'm lining up the opening of the flower with the flower that I've stamped. And I'm using a super light amount of purple ink to go over that. That just gives a little more definition to the edge and kind of blends everything together. You can definitely skip this step if you want to, but I do find it handy in smoothing it out. And the mask set actually has the positive pieces, so you could always take the positive piece of that flower, tape it over the flower, and then do some layering, some like masked layering. So it's nice to have that option available, but definitely is not necessary. After I finished with all of the flowers, I have the coordinating dies to cut these out. I like that these dies cut pretty close to the edge, only leaving a tiny white trim. After I have them cut out, I have arranged them on the front of a note card. Now these aren't glued down, I just arranged them here, played around with how I wanted them positioned. And this is a 4 1/4 by 5.5 inch note card with the score line on the left. So I'm just laying them out here. Again, no glue. Now I'm taking a piece of masking paper. It's a little sticky. It's cut to the same size, and I'm laying that down on top of the die cuts to pick them all up together. You could also use Glad press and seal for this if you want. Mine's in my kitchen, and I don't want to go up to my dirty kitchen, so I'm using masking paper instead, and I can reuse it later. I removed that. One of my flower or my leaves fell off, so I'm just attaching it back on. So now all of those die cuts are arranged together. So I can flip this over and add glue along the back of all of these die cuts. Liquid glue is definitely the best for this so that you can wiggle things around once it's placed. Highly recommend using liquid glue. I do find it more cost effective than using a tape runner also. Okay, so once all the backs of the die cuts are covered with glue, I'm taking my note card and laying it right into the glue and pressing that down. So using that masking paper was just an easy way to assemble the die cuts, pick them up all together, and glue them down all together. Once that's dry, or if you're impatient like me, you can now remove the masking paper and save it for a later use. So all of my die cuts are now in position. I will go and squeeze a little bit of liquid adhesive under some of the die cut edges that were layered when we did that process. Okay, so now we'll just cut off the excess from the edges. I can save those little pieces along with the extra flowers and leaves that we have on the right for a future card. So now it's time to do fussy cutting around this little scene that we created in the corner of our card. This is how you can take smaller images and create a large shape for the front flap of a card. Now, I don't mind doing this fussy cutting. If you wanted to, you could choose easier images to cut out, maybe some leaves or less intricate flowers. But I definitely think it's worth it in the end. So look at your stash and see what images you can put together kind of on the left-hand side of a card to create a shaped front flap. As before, I wanted the inside flap to have that debossing pattern to it. So this is a 4 1/4 by 5.5 inch top folding note card, and I'm using the debossing on the front of that. I ran it through to cut the little holes. Now I'm using the embossing mat to kind of press those patterns in just to really enhance that texture. Now we can put glue on the inside of that card that we just did the debossing on the front, and I'll glue the back of our shaped card right into that. And now we have our trifold card design with the flowers on the front, the debossing inside that, and then the area on the inside to add our personal message. Now I did think it would be fun to add one of my extra flowers to that inside flap. So on the front you have the big flower cluster. On this flap you just have a small flower cluster and an additional sentiment. So you can really put anything on this inside flap. I just like to make sure that when the front flap is closed, this part is hidden. So it's like a surprise on the inside. So I finished off the card by adding the Hugs die cut on the front and the Sending Happy Hello on the inside. Now that Hugs die cut, I glued 3 together so that that little piece sticking off on the right-hand side is strong enough. It's not like delicate hanging off there. I also added blue cardstock to the inside where I write my personal message. I really hope you'll give this technique a try. It's kind of a fun interactive card that doesn't require any specialty dyes, which I think is a big win. You can try this with what you have on hand. If you are interested in the products I talked about today, they're all linked below in the YouTube description. I always have it there. But you can go to my blog for much more information. You can even save cards or bookmark them so you can refer back to them later. You can even bookmark videos there. I am hoping that you'll check out these other videos at the end also, sharing similar techniques with more ideas. Thanks for spending this time with me. We'll see you soon, and Happy New Year once again.